Well, here's a look at my eye in the sky during the eclipse. They reined it in for service, I guess. It was up there for 4 days. Morning, YouTube. Well, I'm passing by the Yuma Proving Grounds here, and which I was camped outside of over there by that domed rock. That's where the ghost town was that I was near. But I had to stop and look at these two large guns. This one will shoot 17.5 miles. Or has a range of that. That one got a range of about 20 miles. So pretty impressive. I mean, one of the guys on YouTube said that they were nuclear cannons, but I don't know where you got that from. They don't really. Hey YouTube. Well, my next stop is Yuma Territorial Prison, and I'm sure you've heard of it. If you've watched pretty much any Western that had to deal with bad guys, either they were being sent here, or they're escaping from here, or they spent time here. Famous movie 310 to Yuma dealt with sending a guy here. So let's go in and check it out. Well, I'm inside the grounds of the old Yuma Territorial Prison, and it's right at the where the Gila and the Colorado rivers come together. There was a ferry landing down below, and all the goods were brought in that way, all the supplies up the rivers. Hostile territory, some things had a little trouble getting through, so there wasn't a lot of local town here. Back then, that ghost town I was in, that was bigger than Yuma. And so they used prison labor to build a lot of the furnishings for the superintendent's house. He was a political appointee and did pretty good. He was getting like $250 a month and a house to live in, which back in those days was a hefty sum of money. And this is the original Sally Port where all of the prisoners had gone through, all made out of adobe. And it's been restored, obviously, but still, imagine the various evildoers that went through here. You know, a skylight that I'm sure the guards had watched down from above. So let's go in the museum. Now, one thing I noted is that you can see what you're coming into, but once you're inside the walls, you are not seeing out. They did have a small door to get in and out with a peephole, but you want to isolate the criminals, that's pretty much a good way to do it. Just cut off all access to the outside world. So when an inmate came here, if he didn't bring it with him or make it himself, he had to do without. And there were shops here that they were assigned to work in. They had to spend 48 hours a week working in the fields. Obviously, got to grow food for the place. Working in the shops. After hours, in their spare time, they could make things for themselves or make things to sell at a craft fair. That anything that was made and sold at that fair that was open to the public, that money, part of it would be saved, and he would be given it when he left. The museum is not original, but it's built on the foundation of the mess hall. They built that in 1939. So now I'm in this cell block. It was designed to hold 204 prisoners. At times there was actually up to 240 here. The more trusted ones were would sleep in the hallway here. It was roofed over. It's made out of granite block that the inmates quarried here, and as you can see how far away the lock is from the actual door, there was just no way anybody would be able to reach that. But the cells are 6 by 12 and would hold 6 prisoners. So there was 2 sets of bunks. Let's take a look at this one down here. It's been reconstructed. But you get the idea. There's 2 sets of bunks, and there's a steel ring on the floor that if the inmate was acting up, they could chain him there as punishment. There's some cells. This one's is sort of a double, but it may have had a door between the 2. But these are the original iron bunks, and they built these back in 1901 because the wooden bunks that were originally here were infested with bed bugs, and it was the only way to get rid of them. So I think prisoners that just really need to be punished, they put them in the dark cell. And I don't know if we'll be able to see anything in here. But it was quarried right straight into the granite. There was a cage here. And perpetual darkness. There was like a vent hole, but there were stories that some of the guards were a little more cruel than others would drop snakes down in here. They were in perpetual darkness except for when their bread and water was brought in, because that's all they would have. And there was sometimes multiple inmates in here. They'd strip them down to their underwear, put them in here, and basically solitary confinement. Some of them for a lengthy amount of time, and would actually lose their minds. So, not a place you'd want to be sent to. Even though some people call this the hellhole of the West, it was actually pretty modern for its time. They did have a large library, electric lights, and I think one thought was that it got its name because we're in southern Arizona in the summertime. It can get blistering hot, so all of these walls would have just absorbed heat all day and radiated out, so it just would not have been comfortable. But then again, it was prison. Sort of interesting is that in the new yard, when they got rid of the library, the overcrowding, they built this area and added all these more cells, but they didn't. The locks are easily reached. So they must have had better locks or something. So only 2 prisoners ever escaped from inside the walls of this prison, and both of them from this area, the new yard. One was actually him and an accomplice or partner were able to saw through a lock and get out. Like I said, you could reach the locks here in the old section. There's no way you could reach the locks, and was able to climb over the wall and escape. The guards who were on duty that night were fired because the only way he could have got out or got away was that they weren't paying attention. The other one, with 2 prisoners actually escaped, but one of them was caught just outside, and the other one escaped out into the desert and never seen again. So did he survive? Is he out there somewhere in the desert? Yeah, we'll never know. When they designed this prison, they designed it to hold men. They didn't expect there to be women in here, but over the course of 30 years, 29 women did serve time here. They actually ended up building a separate yard for them to keep them separated from the male prisoners. Probably a good idea. Let's see. A couple of notables were Lizzie Gallagher in 1878, and she was sentenced for manslaughter, but after 42 days she was released. In 1889, Manuela Fimbras gave birth to a baby boy here and took care of him here for 2 years. When she was pardoned, the guards said they didn't miss her because she was unruly, but they did miss the young boy. I'm up in the guard tower, or reconstructed guard tower. You got the prison cell blocks behind there. This was the building with the cafeteria, the sally port, and you can see these bridges across here. That gray one was built. Was actually a first one of the highways that came through, and they didn't have to wait to take the ferry across. But half the prison ruins were destroyed and torn out when the railroad put this new bridge in. And before that, of course, the prison had been closed for a number of years. It closed down in 1909, became the Yuma High School for a while, and to this day the high school's sports team's name is Criminals, or Crims, and they wear that proudly. During the Depression, of course, it was 1924. There was a fire that destroyed a lot of the prison, and during the Depression, a lot of people came in and scavenged building materials, which was typical of ruins. And they also, a lot of hobos took up residence here, and so the town eventually realized that they had to save this history, and the people got together, raised a lot of money to protect it and redo it, and then eventually the state took it over, and as you see it today. So it was a prison from 1876 to 1909, only 33 years. So the one thing I found really fascinating is how the prison came to be here in Yuma. Turns out the Territorial had a group of representatives deciding where things were going to be, where the capital would be of the territory. Originally, the prison was going to be in Phoenix, but all of the representatives or legislature of the territory went out to lunch, except one. And he was a businessman here from Yuma, and when they were all out, he went over to the bill, crossed off Phoenix, and wrote Yuma. And they came back. They didn't really go back and reread it. Sound familiar? And passed it, and that's how the prison ended up being here in Yuma. So it's sort of interesting that a little bit of chicanery put a prison to punish people for chicanery and other things. So underneath the reconstructed guard tower is the original water supply, the cistern for the prison. So that's the original cistern. The water was pumped up from the river down below, and they built a platform over the top to try to slow down evaporation, and eventually put a roof over it and became a guard tower. And it's huge, but there's a walkway along the side of it that would have connected up to the wall, and they actually glassed it in, and it became a barracks for the guards. So they had an overview of the prison all the time. Well, that's the end of my visit here to the Yuma Territorial Prison Museum. Very interesting place. If you're a fan of westerns like me, you've heard of criminals being sent to Yuma and to this prison. So it's very interesting, I think, but then I'm a historical buff. Surrounding it, or on the one side anyway, there's the Yuma wetlands, there's a bike path, there's a little park down here, and it's lunchtime, so I'm going to go find myself a nice shady spot. I think there's a spot over there with some picnic tables, and gonna relax and get back on the road. We'll see what I can find. Right? See you later, YouTube.